I am just going to give folks a couple more minutes to get in and get comfortable, and then we'll get started on this rainy night.
Is this all of us? A panel?
Yes, yes.
And who are we waiting for if this is all of us?
I'm just waiting for people to come on into the room in the webinar form. Figured I'd give people a minute, but then we'll get started.
Oh, so there are other people.
Yeah, so I did it webinar style. So you guys can't see all the people watching, but they can see you. So we'll, and then we'll record it and share it as well. But
so we won't get to know who's on I guess the other end.
you should be able to see through chat or maybe participants. I don't know what your screen looks like.
I see you in
Does
the
it
middle
say?
and all of us at the tippity top.
No, on the bottom. Like you
Oh.
don't have the menu option.
More show
Does it say?
captions, Q&A, share, raise hands, chat, all that good stuff. Participants, there we are.
Why are we so nosy?
Claire, Devin, Jamie, most codes, Nadia, Nicole, Reverend Renee.
Looks like people are on their computer and their phone. They're in twice.
All right. Well, we'll get started before we start listing all the names in the panel. But welcome everyone to our Juneteenth edition of our monthly community conversation through BLM New Hampshire. I appreciate everyone tuning in. And I appreciate every amazing person on this panel tonight, especially in this busy time of Juneteenth. I'm very grateful. I'm going to go around the Zoom and just want you guys to introduce yourselves. But I am Tanisha Johnson, the Executive Director of Black Lives Matter New Hampshire. And I'm going to pass it to Miss Jerry Ann to introduce yourself.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm Jerry Ann Bogus, the Executive Director of Black Lives Matter, of the Black Heritage Trail of New Hampshire.
We can switch.
Thank you for having me.
Anthony.
Good afternoon. Good God Almighty. Good evening, everyone. My name is Anthony Poore, and I have the pleasure of serving as the President and CEO of the New Hampshire Center for Justice and Equity.
James.
Good evening, everyone. My name is James McKim, and I am past president and current first vice president of the Manchester NAACP.
And Miss Brenda.
Good evening. My name is Brenda Lett. I am with the New Hampshire Black Women's Health Project.
So I wanted to bring us all together, and I just want to say this panel is a powerful panel right now. I wanted to bring us all together, one, because it's Juneteenth, and two, of what's going on in the world and our communities, the goods and the bads, and just being a community leader, a Black community leader in this time right now. I thought it would be great for the community to hear from us and to hear what we're experiencing, how we're experiencing, how folks can continue to show up. What does it mean to be an ally? What does it mean to be a partner with organizations that are Black led or for Black people or for social and racial justice, and what they can do? So I want to jump right on into it and just want to ask at first, put a little smile on y'all's face. Do we have any good news? Do we have something to talk about, something great to share with these wonderful folks about what's going on? Something good in your life just to make y'all smile, because I need to see some smiles.
It's Juneteenth and we're celebrating. That's good news.
Yes.
I'll go next, and I think I was enthralled and impressed with the level of engagement of the No Kings rallies across the country this Saturday. See that level of participation. I heard something upwards to 5 million people got out and raised their voices in opposition to what we see taking place today. So for me, I found that to be incredibly empowering in certain ways, and it gave me a little hit that I needed to let it know that there's a lot of good people out there of good conscience who are equally as concerned as we are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Maybe.
Well,
I was, oh, go ahead. Go
I was
ahead,
going to say,
James.
to some degree, Anthony stole my good news. But I'll add on top of that, I was just listening to NPR, and there was a commentator who has studied mass protests across the country for a number of years, going back to before the first Trump administration. And she made the comment that the protests over this past weekend on Saturday were all peaceful.
Mm-hmm.
And it just heartens me that such a huge number of protesters, almost a percent of the 1% of the total population in the United States, which is a historic number, which is something to be proud of, good news. But the fact that it was non-violent made me really happy to hear, because we have this administration who just wants the violence, right? They want it to be violent so they can bring out the armed forces like they tried to do in Los Angeles. But to have that many people out across the country and not have violence, that was heartening to me.
Miss Brenda, you want to share something good before we get into this deep conversation?
Well, I will just add to those two comments associated with the people coming out and showing their resistance. And I will add that that resistance has been a big part of my life. And what I'll add to it, it is really based on love, love for all people. And so that's what I saw in the various folks around the country. They cared about their families, they cared about their community, and it was really based on love. And I understand that love can conquer it all.
Come on now.
I'm just saying, you asked, I'm sure.
Well, let's dive a little bit deeper into that. I think one of the questions that have been coming up, and I think it's come up over the years in the past, and now it's coming up again. Now that there are more Black-led spaces and led organizations, folks are wondering how they can participate or if they can participate, and how do they show up in these spaces and what are they supposed to do? So how do we kind of work with them and challenge them from being waiting for an invitation to come into our space or come into our programs or talk to us or partner with us, to just being proactive in that and reaching out? and holding them accountable too.
Tanisha, give me that one more time.
No, it's question number 2 in order.
Right, I got
How
you.
do we challenge our allies from moving into being waiting for an invitation, right? And coming into our spaces. There's a lot of times I get a question of, well, this is a BLM event. Am I supposed to be there as a white person, as a non-Black person? What do I get to? Am I supposed to help you, or am I supposed to just sit on the sidelines? And it's like, there's moments where we want to say, come on now, like, you know what this is, you know what to do, but sometimes it seems like folks don't. And so that accountability piece is we're trying to figure that out. How do you help us and still be held accountable for your own stuff? How do you be held accountable as an ally? All the things, like, what are y'all thinking about? And how do you respond if people say that to you? Maybe y'all don't have that problem.
Well, go ahead.
Can I just go first? Because this
Go.
is just a little different for us. Because most of
Yeah.
our programs are actually, you know, and the people that attend our talks, and we have lots of talks, community dialogues that we've been doing for a while, and they're
Mhm.
open to the public, and the majority of the public that comes are the white, you know, the white folks. And so they come with this desire to learn more. And we
Mhm.
saw a lot more, you know, after the George Floyd murder, you know, that people wanted to understand how we got to where we are.
Mhm.
And I think one of the things that we do is realize that people are on the different paths of their journey. Some people come at some spaces that you go, where are you living? What, you know?
Mhm.
And some
Mhm.
people are have already started reading, and some people are well on their way to doing the social justice work. And so when you have that mixed crowd, you get these odd questions in a mixed crowd, and you have to, that's why we always have like a facilitator to help with the dialogue, so that people get comfortable and realize that there's no wrong question if you come in a space with an intent of learning and understanding. And I think one of the things that we always say to everybody, the work that we do is together, but the learning you do is individual.
Hmm.
You have to be responsible for your own learning. You know, we can pour everything out in our talks and stuff, but you never know when somebody's ready to listen. You never know what touches somebody's heart and open them up to change. You never know what that point is that somebody may have this aha moment. So we try to make sure that no questions ridiculed, that we don't hide from the hard truths and the hard facts of what it is. We don't sugarcoat the environment in which we are. And, you know, we always say, you know, some people may be triggered, but the work, that individual work, is what really we can't do for you.
Hmm.
Mm.
And I
James.
think if you come with that mindset and it's clear, you know, it's
Mhm.
work. It's
Mhm.
work. This is work. It's
Mhm.
relearning for our majority. It's relearning what they've been taught all their lives, what they believe fervently all their
Yeah.
lives.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would pick up on what Jerry Ann said. People are at different points in their own journey.
Mhm.
And there are people we run into who don't even know that the NAACP exists.
Mm.
Really? Still.
So there's that first, and this goes to exactly Jerry Ann's point. People are at different points along their journey, different
Yeah.
points in their
Mhm.
knowledge of what exists. And there are people who've never left New Hampshire, never
Yeah.
left their town.
Mhm.
So having a knowledge of what happens, what organizations are outside of their little town, many people just don't have that to begin with.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, So I think, thinking about your question, there's so many layers to this. I mean, how can allies be challenged to move from being invited into black spaces? Well, first they have to know that these black spaces exist,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then moving from being invited to being accountable. As Jerry Hand said, many of these folks are just learning that there are the inequities in the first place, so they're not ready to be held accountable, right? So in some cases, and I know, and many times we say, it's up to you, white person, to learn all about this. They don't know where to go to learn. That's one reason why they're asking us.
Mm.
So, and to some of your other questions about how do we, being in the skins we're in, kind of deal with this questioning and keep our own sanity, we have to be prepared. And sometimes we just have to say, I can't answer this question at the moment. Here's where you can go to get that answer. Just being cognizant of the fact and empathetic to these people who, as Jerry Ann says, some of them are coming wanting to know, but they don't know what the right questions are to ask. They were not taught this in history class. So I think being prepared to help them with a little education and telling them there are these spaces. Feel free to touch base with whoever the coordinator of these spaces are and ask them, because in some cases they shouldn't be joining. We have this discussion about there's some spaces where we want just Black people, and there's some spaces that we want mixed. And even we Black people don't necessarily know where those spaces are. So everyone has to have a little grace here,
Right.
I think, because we're struggling together, and we need to figure all this out together, which is where I think your question is trying to go, right? How do we bring people together to figure all this out?
Is there a point though where, this is, we've been fighting for racial justice, social justice since we were liberated, right? And we've been fighting for basic human rights and all the things. We've gone through several versions of social justice movements, civil rights movements, the errors. Is there a point though, even if you've been in New Hampshire all your life, unless you were under a rock, right? Isn't there a point where you should know some of these things or have some version of a tool, with the internet being what it is and technology being like, can we still say some people are just learning, or do we mean they're just learning how to deal or learning how to change behaviors? Or because we can't just say they're still learning about certain things, right? Like, I'm gonna put that question out there. Like, are we tired of that giving them this, we know you're still learning, or is it still really applicable?
If I may, I'll chime in on that one. And I think there's a couple things that we need to remember. First and foremost, when you talk about being invited into Black spaces, I think the word invitation is key, because we've all been in spaces and places in this majority white state where people just take the initiative to come in without being invited. And I think how you start a relationship is in some way indicative about how it will end. I also think that still live in New Hampshire. Some of us weren't born here. Remember, 6 out of 10 Granite Staters were not born in this state. So I represent the majority of Granite Staters in saying that I grew up in a different state in Ohio in the Midwest, where the majority of my citizenry represented my lived experience. You're in an environment where still 85, 88%, or 85, a little less than that, 85, 82% predominantly white, higher, if you will. This is still a majority white state. And in some parts, it's still relatively rural. So I think there are elements of our citizenry here who have not been exposed to elements of our culture, except in part those parts of our culture that are mass produced and fed, right? Music, dance, fashion, right? All those things that shape the dominant narrative, but they're not exposed. I personally think that there is space for allies in this work because the issues that we're attempting to face are larger than any one individual or in any one community. And we are going, if we're going to do this work effectively in New Hampshire in particular, it requires the support of allies, white allies, brown allies, human allies to do this work. And, I know this conversation is literally about, Black lives and our experience here, but I feel I would be disingenuous if I didn't think about our queer brothers and sisters and our brothers and sisters out there in the disabilities community as well,
Mhm.
because this dominant narrative of the white cisgender, heterosexual male, and then there's everybody else. And so,
Mhm.
I think our destinies are tied in many ways, and this is why I personally advocate on a Big Ten approach, but carving out spaces and places where we can be our unique selves as well.
Mhm. One of the questions that just came in, since we are talking about these allied organizations and partners, is what do we want to see more of from allied organizations, and what should they stop doing? um, I know I personally want to see more partnership, more sharing of resources, more sharing our voices and uplifting our voices. Um, and that could be whether it's financial or just, through mission and, social media and those types of pieces. But um, I'd love to see more of it without being asked, just doing. So what do you guys feel?
Three things for me immediately come to mind. One, I'd like the complete absence of any of these what I call performative actions. Right?
Mm,
This idea you do it because you feel you need to do it as opposed to an authentic desire to in some way right a past wrong. Second of all, the idea of resource sharing I think is really, really important, not only within our communities, but those communities are affected. And I'm not simply talking about fiscal kind of aspects. I'm talking about human capital that we can share. I would argue in some ways the social capital of the communities is more important than our financial aspect, although that can't be denied. And last of all, when I think about allies, be actually willing to risk something tangible.
mm,
These performative comments in Facebook and Instagram and Snap without either ponying up a buck or two or actually going out there and joining in solidarity at a march or an action out here. Use your voices, your resources, your relationships, and your networks in support of a cause that you may not be directly impacted by, but you feel a need because you want to connect under common humanity. Going back to what Brenda says in terms of what can
mm.
actually work here, this idea around love. Is that right, Miss Brenda?
You know, um, I struggle with these kind of conversations, you guys. You may already know that. And I struggle with it because we all pretty much got here the same way. We had
Mm,
parents, and we all pretty much came through that vaginal canal some type of way. So that says to me that we are human. And when we start going into these boxes of colorization, black, white, when we know that the European people that we know are technically not the color white, even though we call them that. And, many of us who refer to ourselves as black, we're not really black, you know. So I just struggle with this conversation because we know that for those of us who were our ancestors that was kidnapped, right, brought over here, worked as uh, people who shouldn't have been working for free. We know that there was some European looking people that helped get us to safety. We know that there are decent people that have nothing to do with the color of their skin. We know that. Yet we continue to be in these kinds of conversations as if though we don't know that.
mm,
But we do. And we know that we can love people and not like them very much. We know that. So there are certain things that we know that we don't seem to acknowledge. For me, Anthony Poor, we can't do justice if we're not going to deal with truth.
Mm.
We can't have trust if we're going to be lying. So I struggle with this, and I'm sitting here now with my ears burning, trying to keep my blood pressure low, Sister Tanisha. So I don't have a heart attack having these kinds of conversations over and over again when we are human beings, period, full stop. Some of us are decent, some not so much. But all of us, like James said, are human, and none of us are perfect. So we fundamentally know that. And then that means we know that there's a system that we all participate in that maintains this insanity, which is also about the truth. That is the truth.
Mm-hmm.
That there are policies and principalities that keep us having these kinds of conversations. And we are not moving the needle in a way that's working for me. Because, I only got a few more years on the planet. And I got less time here in the state of New Hampshire. So that's kind of what I have to offer. If we're not going to deal with telling the truth to each other, being honest about stuff, how do we expect to have this justice that we say we seek? I yield.
There's something that Sister Brenda just said, and I just want to just add a little bit to it, because systems don't operate by themselves. Humans operate these systems. And until the humans get an understanding, be truth tellers, understanding what got us here, understand how they created these systems, we're still going to have these systems. So that's the paradox that we're in, right? We have these systems that were created by humans, and the only way they're going to be deconstructed is by humans, and by having the humans understand how these systems came to be. And we're talking about around justice, equality, equity, all of those things that were wiped out of these systems to preference one group over another. So to me, that's where we start. And there was something that Anthony just said too that I just took a note down about. We don't want performative action from our partners. We don't want them just acting because they want to right a past wrong. Yes, I do. I want them fixing what they did. I want that guilt. I want to guilt them into action. They did something and they need to know what it was. And so if that, take the African burying ground in Portsmouth, for instance, if there wasn't white guilt around covering over, disappearing a whole history of people, it would still be buried. It took that understanding, that guilt, that yes, they need to right this wrong, that created the African Burying Ground Memorial Park.
Well,
And
Jerry,
in
be
order for
clear.
us to get reparations, that's the same thing.
I agree with you 100%. What I was trying to think is, I'll use the example, having the obligatory, potluck lunch because it happens to be Black History Month.
Yes.
Those are the kinds of activities I'm referring to that we've all been exposed to. That's the performative kinds of activities I'm referencing. I'm all in favor of using white guilt to advance a particular agenda if necessary. But that's what I was referring to when I was talking about performative actions, things that lack that are in someone authentic. I do want to reinforce, if I may, and I'm going to use the example of housing as an example because I think what Brenda talks about in terms of systems and James talked about, and then you reinforced, Jarian, let's talk about housing, right? And so, and this is not intended to be a commercial, but as you know, the center just recently last week released a new housing study, a link to our policy platform that says one of the best ways for us to reduce the racial wealth gap, right, is to advance home ownership opportunities, generally speaking, and has a disproportionate positive impact on our communities of color. One data point there is home ownership rates in New Hampshire for black families are 33%. For whites, it's 72%. There's almost a 40-point difference there. We didn't get here overnight, and systems that were developed supported, and advanced were done by people. So whether it was the use of black codes, redlining, and other forms of discriminatory housing practice that supposedly, as of 1968, with the Fair Housing Act, was supposed to have been eliminated, which we know hadn't, we wouldn't be in this situation today. So yes, we need to speak truth to power and talk about systems that have been in place. But let's, to Jerry Ann's point, let's also remember it was a specter of white supremacy, and then the humans who believed in those elements that allowed those systems to not only be built but sustain and endure over time.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask, how do you have these conversations from a point of view of using, the term of humans when we know some of these systems that were built, like you said, were from that Anthony? And so I struggle sometimes of having the conversation and not using, like I, and not using the black versus white versus brown versus all of this and all of that. And so, in coming from that place of love, I really do struggle with that because for me, the color or race, what we want to call it, is so prevalent in what's happening in the world right now in different forms that it becomes hard not to always say that piece of it. You know what I mean?
So this is where I generally get some pushback when I take this approach, but it is the human approach, as Brenda called out. We each have our set of personality dimension values. And there's this notion, of course, of intersectionality, where I'm not just a black, but I'm a black man, right? I'm a black man who grew up in New Hampshire. And so I think sometimes we get caught up in the black and forget about the man, forget about the New Hampshire. Not that it's not important, but if we focus so much on one aspect of our personalities, that obfuscates others. And so I also think about this notion of white guilt. And I struggle with that one because the people today, white people today who run institutions, run systems, I think we do a disservice by not distinguishing that the people alive today didn't create the systems. They may perpetuate them, but they didn't create them. And we say white people today created these systems. Well, the people today did not create the system. They're perpetuating it. But when we say they created it, they get on the defensive because they didn't create it. So part of this is language, right? Part of this is making sure we're appealing to someone, and this is really difficult, to the notion that it's to everyone's benefit to address inequities of all forms. We just happen to have experience with the inequity that is around people with darker colored skin.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing that now as, DEI, dare I say it, is being taken away in several different, state budgets, federal, whatever. And we're seeing that it's not just a Black thing, but it is impacting those with disabilities, veterans. I have this shirt and this sticker that says all the different things of who DEI might be. And the list is, forever. And I think people are now realizing that. And I agree with you, James, that we're over here like, where you been? You know, we've been talking this for years upon years. We do have the experience of fighting it, and other folks are now joining into that battle, which is probably why the No Kings protest was so successful.
Yeah. And if I can just add, we get the
Yeah.
question, so what can I do? Well, as we're talking about, Jerry Ann brought up the notion, and we've talked about the notion of systems, and we're all a part of a system. We're all part of institutions. We all interact with institutions. Those who are in those institutions and execute practices, policies, and procedures in those institutions can affect change in those institutions, thinking about where they have sphere of control and sphere of influence. Right?
Well,
Every one of us has a sphere of control and sphere of influence. We need to all think about where those are and how we can address those inequities in our spheres of control and our spheres of influence.
Well, I want to take that and take it into talk about, I think, ourselves as the Black community here in New Hampshire, and having us come together. Do you feel sometimes it is hard? I'm going off script. Y'all looking at your
We're
questions
already
like
off
this is
script.
not on it.
We're already off script, so go right ahead.
But do you feel like it's hard to bring our community together? Do you feel, I mean, and I'll just speak just for in New Hampshire, not from a global perspective, but in New Hampshire, do you find it hard to bring our folks together to really do that collective power piece and really kind of work on ourselves so that we can get to the next level? Miss Brenda, your hand is raised.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you're taking hands. There was somebody who had their hand up, but I just want to kind of share and add this whole concept. I do this mental health and racism work. This is kind of like what I've been doing all my life, you guys. I mean, literally all my life. And so, when I think about it, and during our recent Undoing Racism training, there's a book that the Haymarket people have called Courage to Change. So, initially I thought, oh, wow, you got to be strong to, make change in your life. And then I saw it from a personal place. There's some things that I personally struggle with in my own life. I need courage to change that. I need to be willing to do the work that it takes to make that change, to make me a better person. So when we start thinking about having courage to change, we have to be willing to step out, even though it may not be very friendly when you do it. And I'm here to tell you, again, that's been most of my life, where I've said things and did things that people didn't like, didn't care for, didn't care for me. And fortunately, I didn't give a crap because I felt that I was on a personal mission. I still do. And so the mission that I was given, I had to have courage to do it. And that means I have to lean on my ancestors. I have to pray to my God. I have to call Anthony Poore if I need something, whether he gives it to me or not. I got to have the courage to do that. And if he doesn't give it to me, I still got to love that brother because he's my brother. So again, I just think people have to deal with their purpose and live that and have the courage to make the changes that they need to make in order to do what God has purposed them to do.
Right. And Tanisha, I think about this, I'm lucky to have grown up underneath the leadership, tutelage, mentorship of Brenda and others like her, all those folks who kind of came before me that I can look back and say, thank you. So, Brenda, I'm gonna give you your flowers right now. I love you. I want to say thank you for everything you've done to make me a better person and to make New Hampshire a better place where we can all feel like we can belong. Not all the time, but I tell you what, sometimes. That said, is it hard to organize our community? Yeah, it is not necessarily easy. And I think there are some things that are just built into this thing called New Hampshire that's hard to unpack. First and foremost, it's this belief that ain't nobody here. Now, we all know on this call that when it comes to our communities of color, Black, brown, and people alike, right? Melanin enhanced is what term we like to utilize, is that there's quite a few of us here. You know, we're somewhere between 200,000, 225,000 people with state with only 1.4 million people in it. Let's be clear, right? And so and that population has doubled over the past 10 years. And Jerry Ann has heard me say this time and time again, that we have resources, relationships, and institutional discretion in ways that we've never had before. And we better start damn well using it. That's number one. So we got to reinforce this idea that we do have folk here, right? We are not invisible. Number two, I think it's a when we think about our communities of color, particularly those of African descent, our lived experience of people, say, coming up during the Great Northern Migration, the largest migration of Black and brown people in the history of the world. That lived history is a small percentage of the Black folks who live here because the majority of people of African descent are from Africa. Not necessarily African American, didn't come up through things. Can I get an amen, Jerry Ann, right? And so our lived experiences are different. Our cultural narratives are different. So in some spaces and places, our languages are different. So it requires us to work across language, ethnicity, cultural context, and all those things because we're not monogamous. We're not a uniform population. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm trying to say there. And the other thing too is that New Hampshire is a relatively geographically dispersed large state. So if we're going to work collectively in support of one another, we are going to have to it's going to take work. It's going to take some level of effort to be like, let me take my behind up to Lebanon, Hanover. Let me take my behind over to Seacoast. Let me take my behind over to Monadnock, right? To spend time and be in and with community with folks. And in between that, then use technology like the Black Heritage Trail does so effectively and efficiently to bring and host these conversations that invite people from all across the state. So this geographic distribution of folks makes it therefore difficult. So by leveraging technology, we can in some ways help ameliorate and mitigate some of those issues. So to go back to your point, is it difficult? Yes. Is it worth doing? Hell yeah.
And
So how do
I
you?
may had
Oh, go ahead.
I may just add something that James brought up, and I think because it's this work, it didn't start yesterday. Brenda knows this work started. There were Black families way before Brenda came to town, way before I came to town, who were doing this work, trying to get our communities together. And there was something James said, and I want to just come back to it, that, at some point, we need to create these spaces that are Black spaces to have the kind of conversation that we need to have. There is a pathology in our community, and it's a long history of trauma that we haven't faced yet. We our groups, we have been pitted against ourselves from the American history, and that's deep within our DNA. And to come together to create that healing space where we understand each other, where we're knowing where we've come from. I mean, we've been pitted against each other so much that until we can have, and I say these spaces because you need to get, in order to have this kind of conversation at the depth that it needs to go to, you need to be comfortable. You need to be willing to be vulnerable. You need to be willing to open up in that space. But if you feel that somebody else from an outside who can't understand that lived experience is there watching, I'm not sure how comfortable we'll be in opening up, like airing our dirty laundry, so to speak, among ourselves. Families do it. I remember when The Color Purple came out, there was this big thing blown across the Black community. Why this film? Why are we doing it? It's airing our stuff. We look bad. We look this. But in private, in Black communities, there was, thank God somebody said this. Thank God somebody did this. Here we can have the conversation. But in the broader public, there's some stuff that you just want to keep in the family, right? And understand it yourself. So that's what I think when I think about what is needed. We had a talk last year and with the Black men in our community. And one of the things somebody said after was, what we need is a talk between Africans that are here now and African Americans to understand each other, where we're coming from, what that means from a person with African descent, what that means living here in New Hampshire, so we understand each other. And healing that part, then we have this collective, this voice that we can move forward.
If I can just add to this, I think this is a really challenging discussion, because on one hand we're saying that we want to have this unified voice. And the other hand, we're saying we want to hide what's going on in our community from the other folks. And by having these private spaces where we have these conversations. And I think the challenge is it's a both and, right? Because white people can get confused about where Black people stand, rightfully so, because we're not all monolithic. Right? Where we're unified is we want to be treated equitably. Right? But
that's a good point. Yeah.
The discussions that go on about our internal, if you want to call it that, how we all think, well, white people are the same way. Not all white people are monolithic. They have discussions. And if white people don't see that we have the same kind of internal struggles, then they're not seeing authenticity. Right?
I struggle with that. I struggle with that, James.
Yeah, I'm struggling with it as well, because I think the challenge that I understand in the way that I understand it, everyone, is the dehumanization of people of African descent. And even when we look at the people who come here from the continent, who generally come here with a culture intact, which includes language, the way they eat, all of that intact. But for African Americans who were brought here, kidnapped, and you know, they tried to strip our culture, but we create culture just by walking down the street. And so there's often this fight against us as people of African descent. You know, particularly African Americans, there's always something going on where somebody don't like us because of something. Our hair, our lack of hair, the way we speak, you know, and on and on and on. So it's the dehumanization for me, where I can't just be a human like everybody else out here. Somehow I'm supposed to be able to dance, speak eloquently, sing beautifully. Whatever I do, I got to do it to the utmost. And in terms of the African community, and I've had this conversation with lots of folks, it's different for the African community when they get here. People don't seem to bother them as much. Let's look at the Chinese. Nobody bothers the Chinese. They go, they have their own community. You know, the Latinos technically have their own community. I'm saying technically because it's a huge community. But if you just look like you are Black, there's dehumanization. And if we can't have a conversation about that, how can we fix it, Tanisha? If we can't talk about what it is, that's back to the truth, sis. If we can't deal with the truth and the facts are just what they are. And the facts are that we're human, but we're not treated that way.
And I don't know if I could have that vulnerable conversation in the midst of other cultures who will try to empathize or have the guilt or have, you know, all whatever characteristics, when we just want to honor that with ourselves as Black individuals and share our stories so that we can heal and grow, right? Because there's one, I will say, I have spent time with each of you in certain different aspects, And when it's just us, when I leave from there, there's a certain vibe and certain
Hmm.
level of just lightness that I leave with. When I have that in a mixed space with potentially the same conversation, it's not always the same, which is why the affinity spaces are so important. It's the same thing for our queer brothers and sisters who queer as intersectional, whether you're black, white, whatever, but queerness, they have those spaces, or we have those spaces because it's so important for us to heal through what we go through as queer individuals. You know what I mean? So it's like,
I
I don't know if you
respect
can,
it.
yeah, I don't know if you can have that conversation together. Maybe after we've had ours, in individual affinity spaces, and then bringing that all together as a true healing moment. Absolutely. I still think it's neat. It's like, you got to have that family talk when something happens in the family before you go have it with the neighbors. Like you got to have on the inside what RuPaul say, how you going to help someone else without helping yourself first. So he said,
I re-
she said love, but
I respect that. I respect it.
hmm
I'm thinking though, there are some people that I feel very close to that don't look like me.
hmm
And so I can have any kind of conversation with those people that I want to,
Yeah.
even though they don't look like me.
yeah.
So
Hmm.
that it
Hmm.
so for me it says two things. One, I got to be comfortable with me.
Ooh,
And I take me wherever I go. So I need to be comfortable with me. If I'm
mm,
comfortable enough with me, I don't care who I'm talking to.
mm,
And I need to be comfortable with the other person. I need to be comfortable enough where I can genuinely love them. If they say something or do something that I am offended, don't like, I need to be able to say, hey, I was offended when you said that thing. You I like, but I didn't like that thing you said. We need to be comfortable enough where we can do that. For those of us who have children, I think we kind of get some of that. That I didn't like that thing that you did, son of mine, daughter of mine. But you I like. But don't ever, ever,
hmm
ever do that again. Because then we got problems. Because I don't like that.
hmm
So I just think we need to kind of like work on our individual selves and be strong enough to take on the people who run these policies that are trying to destroy us all, including themselves. They're
hmm
trying to just destroy the whole thing, which includes them. The insanity of that.
Yeah. Can I connect something here? I think this
Yeah.
is really interesting. So I think, you know, Brenda, you and Tanisha are saying kind of the same thing. And what I mean by that is, Brenda, you're saying that we need to be comfortable with ourselves. And I think what I'm hearing Tanisha say, and I agree, to get comfortable with ourselves, sometimes we need to be with people who are like us. That healing notion that Tanisha's talking about. So I think it can be a both and that's the connection I wanted to kind of make.
Yeah. I think there's
Yeah.
always an element of both and ands, right? I live in the gray. I love living in the gray. I don't like living in black and white. And I think there always has to be a both and when we talk about these conversations, especially with, going back to what we first said, how people are on different levels of where they are in life, learning and everything else. And so we have to.
I really like what Brenda said a lot, which is this idea I can like you and at the same time not like some of the things you say or do.
Mm,
You know, and we live in this, and I guess I'm guilty of it like anybody is, we live in this space where we sometimes forget that humanity is both nuanced and complex at the same time.
mm,
And um, allowing people to honestly say some shit that might come off really crazy and be like, as Brenda said, you know what? Like, let's talk about that. Um,
mm,
for me, that's as she described earlier, is an act of love. Because if you didn't genuinely care for that individual, you might just let that go and be like, asshole, as you walk away. right? And so
Mhm.
for me, that's an act of love in and of itself. And I really also appreciate what Miss Brenda said is that we all have people in our lives who may not reflect our lived experience at all, but you would take a bullet for them that don't
Mhm.
look like you at all, but that's your ride or die.
You're right.
And you, in those situations, it's not about this, this melanin enhanced or non-enhanced skin that we have. It's about, can I meet you on the spiritual level? Do we share values? Right? Can I see our common humanity? And when we're able to do that, and we've all had those experiences, then we feel fuller. We're better. We feel like a better human being. Um, that touched me, Brenda, because you're right. And sometimes I forget that. So thank you.
Mhm. Yeah. I appreciated that also. I'm also going to use that with my son, probably tonight. But it's something that
There,
you don't
there's
always think
there's one
about.
other thing. There's one other thing that I want to say, like in certain spaces, whether it's cultural or just the familiar, you know, y- y- sometimes the lived experience, your understanding of who you are, where you are, what you come from, when you come into a conversation, there's an ease in going to the conversation if the person that you're talking to, the group you're talking to, understands certain cultural norms within the culture. And I'm trying to say there's just a ease that you enter in, so you're not you've already broken down a barrier. I think of, like, when you go to a cookout and they put on Frankie Beverly's song,
Yay.
and everybody
Mhm.
jumps up and they dance to it. You're instantly made a connection. You may not have known that person, but you make that connection through that song, right? And so you have an entry point into another deeper conversation. You have an entry point into something more because you connect on a shared cultural experience. And then you don't have to explain, why'd you get up? Why did everybody get up to dance to that song? You don't have to explain it, you know,
Mhm.
or,
Mhm.
Jamaican people eat curry goat, you don't have to explain everything. And sometimes you
You get
get
tired of
tired of
explaining.
explaining everything. You want to be in a
Mhm.
place that you can just let go and you don't have to explain. And then you can get to a deeper level of a conversation.
Hmm.
Cheers.
So
Everybody knows the name.
I'm gonna ask one last question and we'll wrap because it's getting this 8 o'clock. I promised y'all we wouldn't go too long. Um, but how do you hold space for joy and resistance during times of remembrance like Juneteenth? What do you all do to bring that joy back to your life right now when Juneteenth is a celebration, but it's also a reminder of where we were?
I think for me is the fellowship. If I'm in fellowship with people who, and I'll just say this, who love the Lord, right?
That's right.
Who love the positive aspects of life, and even, and this is a tough one, even some of the things that we go through that appear negative are really positive. you know and so being in community and fellowship with people who get that, who understand that because they've lived through some experiences, that brings me joy.
Mm.
Mhm.
Hmm. Hmm.
Thank you.
I just want to reinforce that, Miss Brenda, as I was writing my things. For me, it's my personal, my faith life. It's who I am. I have a deep and enduring relationship with God, and so I lean on that. What they say, faith is the absence of things unseen, and so I lean on that a lot of times because life is hard. Life keeps lifing, and I have to use my faith as a means to find joy in the small things. Because sometimes, and a lot of times, it's the small things that will get me through. Because every day ain't your birthday, right? The other thing you like that, Miss Brenda, huh?
Mhm.
But, and then the other thing too is this idea of community and fellowship. Like I will leave this conversation feeling better than when I walked into it. And it's because we were all together having this conversation and I feel better for it. I was in community and with my community. So that's what brings me joy. Um, it does, and if you think about this, and this is my own personal piece right here, so I apologize. I'll take some privilege here. But if I look at my relationship with Tanisha, Miss Jerry Ann, and James, Brenda, we got decades together, yo. We got a long time together. And I look at you as not only being allies, mentors, and friends, but family.
Yeah, Anthony. I think for me is really making and in New Hampshire, you really have to do it. You have to go out. You have to find those community spaces, and you have to make time for community to find those spaces of Black joy.
Mm,
That going to the Black Lives Matter dinner on Saturday was a space of Black joy, and it was just so good. You just let loose. You didn't have to worry about anything. Going to the concert, to the Howard Gospel concert on Sunday. It was just amazing. You could just let go and you felt community. They were like powerful, powerful
mm,
Yes.
voices. And yes, you come out of there and you're charged. You're ready for anything that comes up to you. And then going home to your family and watch a movie together or
mm,
listen to music together or just cut up, no matter what. That's the thing where you have to find joy.
mm.
But it's to be able to relax. And we don't get that often, because we're here doing this work and we're busy, you know, small number of us doing big things in all these spaces. And we know what that comes. So you really have to put yourself out to put yourself in community. Sometimes it's so much easier to go to bed and pull that cover up and go to sleep. It really
Yeah,
is. You're
it
tired.
really is.
We're tired.
Yeah,
But
I just want to add on a real serious note. I find joy in the work. I
Mm,
really do.
mm,
Um, because what it says to me is I'm doing something. I'm making an effort to make things better for the next generation, like my grandparents did for me. So I
mm.
find joy in that. It's difficult, Anthony
yeah,
Core, but I find joy in it because I feel like I'm doing the right thing.
Yes, ma'am. What
agreed.
about you, James?
Well, I'm here thinking, listening to everybody and thinking about the notion of Black joy. And I struggle with that because I'm with Brenda. I'm a human. I find joy in life overall, in
Mm,
being out in nature, and just talking with people, whoever they are. Um, so I find joy in life. And I love, as Brenda says, I love facilitating conversations. I find real joy in facilitating conversations, difficult conversations. Some of you know that I have a workshop on that. I love doing that. That brings me joy because I'm helping people to get over themselves.
mm.
Right? And make these connections that bring them joy.
That's right. And I have a shirt that says, Black joy is revolutionary. I think one of the best things we can do is bring joy and fun into this work, because it is difficult, and I believe joy and is a close cousin, is a kissing cousin of love. And so I think joy in and of itself is revolutionary. If we could bring more joy and happiness into this work, I think it could do all of us a world of good.
No, um, I just want to thank y'all for this. This was a great, just sitting here listening to you all talk, um, was great for me and definitely took some perspectives to heart. I'm gonna have you all leave this panel with one thing. One of the questions in the chat was, or the Q&A was, what are you doing for the community? So if you want to take a plug, Tell what's going on in your organizations. You got like 2 minutes each to do that. And then we'll end this call, and I'll start with Miss Brenda.
We're working on our second season of the podcast of the Ebony Queens of New Hampshire, which consists of Devonna, Stephanie, and myself. And we are dedicating this second season to talking with some of our brothers about mental health and racism and their, how they think and feel about that. And we are also going to be doing the We Are One Festival. I'm still soliciting both Willard and Sudi to kind of help with that. But we're basically going to be doing those two things. So the podcast will be coming back out, and we'll listen to what our brothers have to say on mental health and racism.
All right, Miss Jerry Ann.
I was too busy reading the chat, so I didn't hear your question.
What do you got going on? How are you working in the community? There you
So,
go. You got a plug.
We have our Juneteenth celebration, June 19th, celebrating the 10th anniversary of the African Burying Ground Memorial. So we're honoring the ancestors with drumming and dance. We have a community dance where we're asking folks and the time that we're in to bring their boots on the ground dance community just for justice, really, that we really need everybody's boots on the ground. And one of the things we're unveiling is our outdoor museum and augmented reality uh, program that anybody with their phone can come and get the whole history of the African Burying Ground, the documents, reenactments, the interviews, videos, all of that. So that will be unveiled to the public on the 19th.
Nice.
Some of the stuff we're doing. It's going to revolutionize how we get this information across all New Hampshire, because we plan to do this everywhere that we have a marker. Make this history visible and accessible.
James?
We've got so much going on. I'll just hit a few highlights. Along with other towns and cities across the state, we are participating in the Frederick Douglass reading and hosting that Frederick Douglass reading on June 28th, and inviting anyone, and I think pretty much all the communities do this. They invite the community to be readers of the speech. So highly recommend that you find, go to the looks like the Black Heritage Trail page that lists the various communities that are having readings. I think the contact information for each is there on the site, so I encourage that. In the environmental space, we just released our first report of air quality monitoring that we've done in the city of Manchester. We're trying to make sure that folks understand, particularly at City Hall, that there are places in Manchester that are not as healthy as other places. So we're trying to gather data, and we're going to be talking with the city about doing things like beautifying the streets, adding trees to downtown.
That's awesome.
In the education space, we're meeting to work with the school district to bring some equity to the school district. And we really need people to be with us in our education committee and going to school board meetings. That really makes a difference when the school board members see us blend and enhance people in the audience. They start thinking a little bit differently than if we were not there. We've seen that happen. We've seen decisions made that were not what the board originally thought they would decide because our presence was there. So we want to get people to join us and get involved in the education space. We're doing other things, but I'll leave it there because of time.
Anthony, stick
Just
with
two
your 2
quick things.
minutes.
I'll be very, very brief. I want to draw your attention on Thursday. We at the New Hampshire Center for Justice and Equity will be releasing a special blog in commemoration of Juneteenth. And I'll read it, Reclaiming the Full Story of Juneteenth, a conversation with good brother Willard Lett. I threw in the good brother there, if you will. And they read his caption where he seeks to explore the deeper truths behind Juneteenth, from the delayed emancipation to the fight for citizenship and justice. So that's available on our website right now at nhcje.org under blogs. You can read it. It is probably one of the most thoughtful and informative pieces you can come across on the subject. And we're excited to release that to the general public on Thursday. The other thing I just want to draw your attention to, and I referenced it earlier, last week at the center, we released our new report looking at the disparate and the challenges to homeownership here in New Hampshire, and particularly the impact it has on the racial wealth gap here in New Hampshire and the disparities in homeownership opportunities. It takes the most up-to-date HMDA data, which is the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act data, alongside the census data, crosstabs it, and provides a really thoughtful look into how did we get here historically, what's our current situation, and what are some programs right now, whether it be down payment assistance programs and others who are assisting young people in particular, but actually communities of color, to not only invest in themselves, but seek, the American dream, owning a home, and all the benefits that come along with that, particularly in terms of our wealth and the creation of generational wealth that we can pass down to our young people. Miss Brenda had referenced grandbabies, so what you can do for your grandbabies. So that's long enough. I'll leave it for there. nhcje.org. Check us out.
Can I just do a shout out to Reverend Renee Rouse? We're doing a graduation party for her. So everyone, of course, is invited. We want to celebrate her accomplishment. She's earned her second master's degree. So, thanks for putting it, putting the website there, because it's on the website, but I forgot to mention it. So thank you.
And just for what's going on with BLM, we did for the summer, we paid for one scholarship for summer camp for a kiddo in the community. Our mutual aid is still going strong. If anyone needs any resources, please go to our website. We will be having a cookout this summer in August. That will also be a baby drive where folks can come and pick up donations. The youth division has a school supply drive going on right now at 4 different locations. Please feel free to donate items, and we'll be distributing those school supplies out in August as well. So yeah, and everybody's links for each organization is in the chat, the webinar chat. If you want to copy those down and check out everybody's website. I want to thank you all for doing this panel tonight. It was inspirational. It was everything. It was all the vibes. It was all the words, everything that we needed. I appreciate you all participating in our Juneteenth edition. And I thank all the attendees. I know some have left already. But we thank you all for showing up and listening to us talk our stuff. We'll see y'all next time.
All right.
Bless y'all.
For
Much
leading
love.
the initiative. Thank you.
Everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Good night.
Thanks all.